the bull market is probably not the best time to be looking at what's going on and trying to overhaul your setup. I think emotions fly a lot when prices are going up, and you get scared and you may do something without all things considered properly. So you should be doing it, in my opinion, in the bear market when no one gives a shit about your Bitcoin or Bitcoin in general.
If you're on an exchange during a bull run, then yes, you should be actively learning self-custody right now, even though it's a bull run. Like that's priority, because we all saw what happened last bull run. Inevitably there's blow ups. So I think that's one of the exceptions where it's like, okay, you're going to start learning, but you're going to be slow and methodical. You're not just suddenly moving vast amounts of money around. You're slow and intentional with what you're doing.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Stefan Livera podcast, brought to you by Bold, the place where you can buy Bitcoin. This is for American listeners over at getbold.io. Now today we're going to be talking a bit about Bitcoin hardware, Bitcoin software, Bitcoin wallets, nodes, how to be a merchant from some of the practitioners, some of the guys who are teaching you about how to do this stuff. So welcome back to the show, BTC Sessions and K3tan.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right, guys. So let's just start with a bit of an overall comment. I mean, there's been a lot of development, a lot of advancement. Here we are, January 2025. Do you have any overall comment on where things are today in terms of Bitcoin, software, and hardware nowadays?
K3tan, you take it, and then I'll follow up.
Look, I think things continue to improve. We've got more hardware coming out, and we've also got more software being developed in the form of like things like FrostSnap and that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to see where this builds out. But I think, for me personally, I tend to wait and see approach, and I get it matures a little bit more, and then I will continue to look at my own stack and think, okay, well, is this the best way forward? But I'm very late with my adoptions. In fact, for me,
that's totally fair. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't go into the cutting edge straight away. I might do so for testing purposes for Bitcoin that is not, like it's just a small amount. But yeah, I take things pretty slow and methodical, and I wait for, a few years, in fact, before I'll jump into something and go, yeah, I think that's a good solution for me. But yes, I'm glad that, more options and hardware and software is becoming more and more available. And I'm very grateful for that in the ecosystem, which is great, which is healthy.
Yeah. Ben?
Yeah. I'd echo the sentiment. My approach is different in that I just like dive headlong into whatever new stuff comes out. And oftentimes that results in like finding the early bugs and all of the broken stuff that comes with the territory, I suppose. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The amount of stuff, I think the thing that strikes me the most is when I started doing Bitcoin tutorials in 2016, the most common question I got asked is, are you going to run out of stuff to do? And the exact opposite has transpired. There are so many tools, so many options available for people when it comes to software, to hardware, to multi-sig, all of these different things. And there's a lot of options. Some are very, very obviously new and new ideas being fleshed out. Others are pretty hardened, but I'm just bullish as hell on the fact that there's so much going on and the market is figuring it out over time. Yeah, I mean, it's never been a better time to be a Bitcoiner when it comes to choices and the ability to pick the tool that best suits your needs.
Right. It's good to have lots of options. And I think both of you are reflecting some of those in the tutorials and the content and the products that you guys are putting out there. So yeah, I thought this would be a good episode for people who maybe they've only got Bitcoin in an ETF, or maybe they've only got Bitcoin on an exchange and they're not sure what's the best way to actually get off the exchange or, actually hold some Bitcoin for myself. So let's start with wallets, and we'll start with software wallets to be clear. So let's get the recommendations from you guys. Let's start on, what is like a noob wallet, like somebody's first wallet? What would you recommend? And then what is a wallet that you like using? So K3tan, do you want to start?
Yeah, so for me, I reckon, the wallet that I love to use is Sparrow Wallet. I think it's one of those wallets that I think is one of the best that's available on the market. I think it's easy to use. Some people disagree with me. I think it's fantastic. I like the UI of it, and it's probably the one that I would recommend. And in fact, it's one of the ones that I put out as a tutorial guide on Twitter, and it went well. It was well received, and so people sort of started going, okay, well, I can start to just like simple hot wallet, hit the generate button, get my 24 words or my 12 words, and I'm off to the races. And then I can just start withdrawing, but for smaller amounts, obviously. So I put some I guess caveats in there in that thread, and I think that's probably the wallet that I would recommend for most people to start to.
Right. So even hypothetical grandma, you'd put grandma onto Sparrow Wallet.
Well, look, with grandma, I'm actually custodying my grandma's
I mean, that's how it often in practice, yeah.
And that's exactly what, that's just kind of how it works. But yeah, I maybe something on a mobile phone, maybe something like a Phoenix or something like that, or maybe even Wallet of Satoshi as a starting point, but that is fully custodial. Do you really own that Bitcoin? Answer's no. So yeah, you got to pick your poison here. And I don't know if grandma's ready for Samurai Wallet or, Ashigaru. So
Fair enough. Ben, okay, so what's your noob wallet recommendation and what's your personal favorite software wallet?
Okay, so I'm going to throw a few things out here. Number one, actually, I would, when somebody's starting to custody decent amounts of on-chain Bitcoin, I do believe that Sparrow is achievable for somebody that's capable of, downloading apps using a basic computer. Like it is attainable, but there needs to be guidance there. And so one of the things I often say if I'm working one-on-one with people, I'm like, all right, when in doubt, press the blue button. They try to highlight it to guide you through the process. I also say things like, there's a lot of bells and whistles on this. It's an awesome tool, but when you start, just focus on the things that you need to know. How do you receive? How do you send? Where's your balance? If you can kind of put your blinders on for the initial foray into Sparrow, then you can start looking around and asking questions. What's this? Maybe I'll go and learn about that this time. And it's a great learning tool. The learning tool itself is actually using the wallet. So I think Sparrow is fantastic for on-chain. When it comes to mobile and like brand newbie for smaller amounts, I've actually found this answer increasingly difficult because there's trade-offs with everything. And so a lot of people, I think their first interaction with Bitcoin is going to be some way of executing a Lightning transaction in the coming years. Like, I think that's going to be the average person's like, oh, I got a few bucks. And so, yeah, like, do you push them towards something that's a custodial thing, but you can send them $2? Or do you say, like, here's Phoenix, it's full self-custody, but like you're going to get hit with fees every time your channel is growing. And so where I've kind of settled right now, and this is ever changing, is it depends on the person's level. If I think that they're capable of getting, Phoenix and saying like, okay, you need a channel. Here's what your channel looks like. And it's kind of like you've got a bucket that you can fill. And if you fill the bucket, you need a bigger bucket. So if you're mostly receiving, then this is how you're going to have to think of it. If I think the person is going to have trouble with that concept, but they want to accept Lightning transactions, I'm okay with the trade-off of Aqua which is natively Liquid, but it's swapping Lightning to Liquid in the background. It's, there's nuance there, but it's not true. You don't own the Bitcoin. You own Liquid Bitcoin, which is part of a big federated multi-sig. It's much less likely to be rugged than a single entity that can rug you, I think. And then the last shout out that I'll give, because I love these hybrid wallets where they're using different mechanisms to ease the onboarding process. I want to give a shout out to Blitz Wallet because they're doing something very interesting. And what they're doing is, if you're just messing around with a few hundred sats, they start you with Cashew, like eCash. When you get beyond a certain threshold, it auto swaps into Liquid. So less counterparty risk, or it's at least distributed. And then when you reach another threshold, it will swap all of that into your own Lightning channel. And so depending on your level of usage, it actually gives you a path towards more self-sovereignty as you're dealing with more sats. So I think that's maybe the future of where things will lead over time with default mobile wallets. At least I hope, where there's a pathway. Whereas if you plunk into Wallet of Satoshi, It's like, if you want more self-sovereignty, you're switching wallets. So that's my general thoughts there.
Yeah, interesting. And I mean, it's a great point you make about sort of trying to find the right balance. Like for me, yeah, personally, my typical favorites are Sparrow Wallet if it's a desktop thing, or Phoenix if I'm using Lightning and things like that. But lately, I have been playing around with Aqua just to sort of understand how the trade-offs of it work, and it is interesting because that user does not have to care about liquidity management. They don't have to care about inbound liquidity. They don't have to care about resizing the channel or what's the fee from Phoenix for resizing my channel up and down. It just quote unquote works, and you've got your 12 words to write down and so on. So that part is interesting. And there may be some users who maybe they want some kind of stablecoin feature. There's an aspect there, and also there's a Bitcoin on chain. So it is interesting that it's kind of got the balance there. But then I guess that's the other question as well. Like how deep into these trade-offs do you go? If, as an example, let's say somebody comes up, you're at a Bitcoin meetup, and they come up to you and they're sort of like, look, Ben or K3tan, I've got this Bitcoin either on an exchange, or I hold Bitcoin ETF, or I hold MicroStrategy, but I'd like to, get some Bitcoin. What is the kind of, at that point, Ben, are you putting them on Aqua, or like, how would you navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, if they're, I suppose it depends on the amount of Bitcoin that they're receiving. If they're like, yeah, hey, I'm doing, thousands of dollars worth of Bitcoin, and then I'm going to get them on chain with like a good on chain wallet, and probably point them to something like Sparrow, like, let's start your learning journey. If they're like, I want to start with like $100 or something like that, I'm probably, based on the person's perceived technical ability, I might point them to Aqua or something along those lines, and just say like, hey, if this builds up to a certain amount, there's a button that you can use, and then you can, we can start exploring like hardware, things like that. But that answer is currently so malleable for me, because I just don't know how
things are moving around so quickly
yet.
Yeah, no, I'd echo that as well. Like, if it was for me, if someone came up to me, I'd be like, yeah, look, hey, it's Sparrow Wallet time. Or if you're on your mobile, then yeah, I think I wish we had, I don't know what the best solution is on mobile. I wish there was a Sparrow Wallet mobile edition, but it's not there. But yeah, again,
I guess you could arguably say something like Nunchuck or Keeper is kind of in a similar vein there.
Yeah. That would work as well. But yeah, for $100 though, Stefan, I'd probably be just like, hey, look, man, Wallet of Satoshi, and you get that great experience.
Or like a Blink example.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing to navigate. I'm inclined to say Phoenix, because that's what I like. But again, that person is going to get a small channel, and then every time they receive, they're getting dinged with a channel like
right. And I believe even in Phoenix, they do have like a request inbound liquidity, but even then you're having to explain, okay, well now what we need to do is do a one-time, channel size of $1,000 or whatever, a million sats, whatever.
We need you to pay some money so that you can receive money. That doesn't go.
And then it's just going to be like, wait, I thought I was doing this to earn money, not spend it, and it's just awkward, right? So it's kind of, and then I mean, here's the other thing: if someone comes in more from the Nostra side, then if they've got like Primal already has like a Lightning wallet in there, so it's kind of, there's that angle of it also. So there's kind of all these elements to kind of explain, and I guess it's challenging if you're trying to explain that for a new person. And then here's the other thing. If you're on the spot with somebody, like you're at a Bitcoin event or a meetup or a conference, pointing them to Sparrow kind of ends the conversation, because you can't demo it for them. Whereas if you here, let me show you now, here's how you do it on the phone, that might actually have a better chance of sticking, right? Because here's the thing, right? When somebody's talking to you right now, right here, you have an opportunity, and they're going to listen to you right now and right here because you're showing it to them. Whereas if you tell them, oh, hey, just remember to do this when you're at home, unless they're motivated, are they really going to go through your Sparrow Wallet tutorial? As much as we would love them to do that.
Yeah, you want the wow factor, right? Like when somebody has their first Bitcoin transaction, you want them to download a thing, hit receive, and then instantly receive Bitcoin.
Works,
so they go,
right?
wow.
Yep.
The hard thing to navigate, like right now, I think, K3tan, you're right. Like the Wallet of Satoshi experience is the experience that somebody wants for their first, but that the pathway to self-sovereignty is then, okay, now that you actually have a meaningful amount of money. We got to get you off that wallet that I told you to get on. So it's like, it's a difficult thing to navigate. This is why I'm bullish on what Blitz is doing, where it's all baked in and moves towards the right way. But it's also very early for that. So there's going to be bugs, there's going to be problems, and you don't want that to pop up either. So I think, K3tan, what you were saying right out the gate is you wait a little bit before you incorporate. I think that's the right approach, especially when recommending things to newbies.
Okay. And then when it comes to, let's say, trade-offs around Liquid, right? How much are you going to explain, right? Are you going to be like, well, actually, there's like 11 or 15 functionaries, and what you're actually holding is not Bitcoin on-chain. You're holding Liquid Bitcoin, which is kind of like custodial Bitcoin, you know, custodied by the Federation, and da-da-da-da-da. Like, now, maybe for smaller amounts, you just kind of let them do that until they are ready for that conversation. But how do you broach that?
So for me, I don't even broach the Liquid conversation at all. I just say, hey, look, if you've got a meaningful amount of money, it's going straight on chain.
On chain or bust. Okay.
On chain or bust. That's my thing. Okay. Now, if you want to use Liquid for some, for some privacy benefit or whatever else, you're probably a bit more advanced or already down that rabbit hole. So yeah, I don't go about explaining it to newcomers. I just say, hey, look, if you've got, 1,000 or 1,000,000 sats, for example, just save up towards that. And then once you're done with that, we'll just withdraw it straight on from the exchange into Sparrow Wallet or a hardware wallet of your choosing. That's probably where I'd go. I don't know if I'd go down the, hey, let's do a temporary Liquid thing for $300 or $500 or something like that.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I don't know.
Ben?
Yeah, so with the example of Aqua, I think when guiding somebody through that, they've divvied it up in two buckets where it's savings and spendings, which I think is a good familiar approach for a newcomer. So I will say, like, hey, if you're doing small amounts, you can receive into the spending wallet, and you can receive, it's kind of like, if you go to a point of sale terminal and somebody pays with a debit card versus a Visa versus MasterCard, it doesn't matter. You just tap and it works. That's your savings wallet. You can receive Lightning, Liquid, and on-chain all to that wallet. And then it's easily accessible and spendable and cheap to use. Right. But then I just say, if it gets to be more money in that than you would feel comfortable with as cash, then you're going to hit this swap button and move it into the savings. And if that builds up, then we'll talk.
Okay, now it's hardware time. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a pathway, and so that at least that pathway is present there. There's the convenience. It's it's not impossible, but it's much more unlikely that the Federation will fully rug everybody versus like a cashew mint or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So at least there's some assurance, but there's a path.
This show brought to you by Mempool.space, the world's leading Bitcoin visualizer. And now they've got an accelerator program. So if you have a transaction that you sent at a fee that was too low to get confirmed, now you can fix this with the Mempool accelerator. The way it works, you can go and search your transaction, scroll down, click accelerator, and you don't need an account. You can pay with Lightning, and then it'll show you it's now in the process of being accelerated, and then after a few minutes, it's confirmed. And so this is a great way to help you out if you are stuck. And this can happen where maybe your wallet doesn't have RBF or CPFP, or it might help you in situations where it's impractical to go and re-sign. So for example, multi-sig with keys in different locations. And thirdly, even in some Lightning scenarios, perhaps a forced close, you might not be able to use RBF. And so in this case, the Mempool accelerator can help you out. So keep it in mind, and you can find out more over at mempool.space/accelerator. This show brought to you by CoinKite.com, the creators of the best Bitcoin hardware security devices, such as the Cold Card Mark IV and the new Cold Card Q. Now, we use Bitcoin hardware security devices to keep our keys offline, our private keys offline. Now, the way these work is you can do that setup, write down your 12 or 24 words on the seed word cards, and keep that secure. Now, you can use this device to interact with the Bitcoin network using software such as Sparrow Wallet, Electrum, or Vector Desktop, or Nunchuck as a few examples. Now, You have a range of security features that you can use with these devices, such as passphrases. You can use seed XOR, or my favorite is multi-signature. Now, if you're starting in a basic way, just start with the device and the USB-C cable, plug it directly to the computer and use it that way, and then later improve your setup. But I believe these devices are great at helping secure your coins, especially as you start to migrate up into multi-signature security. But don't be disheartened or don't be scared away. They are accessible, and I think you actually do learn about Bitcoin in the process. So to get yours, go to coinkite.com, use code Livera to get a discount on your cold card. Yeah. And I think it's important to kind of, if you're viewing it like, hey, Aqua or something like this is like your staging ground, right? That's kind of where you kind of keep it in the middle until you're ready to kind of get to something else like your cold card or your multi-sig or whatever, right? So that's kind of, I think that's the way you can see it. And I think in Bitcoin, I think in years gone by, there was a lot more kind of focus on like, oh no, Bitcoin only, no liquid, no altcoins, no stablecoin, nothing, just Bitcoin. Whereas now, I think it's more like, I think the sense of it now is more like, just be pragmatic, right? Like if fees have risen, because that's the other thing that drove some of the liquid stuff was fees on chain had risen during the, the spam episode of the last, year or two. And so I think that's the other aspect. One other question I wanted to broach before we sort of move on to the hardware is minimum thresholds. Like, do you have a minimum threshold? Like some people talk about 1 million sats as the threshold for withdrawing from an exchange. Would you say that's the minimum threshold? So I guess at today's prices, what is it, 140 or whatever, just say $1,000, right? Say roughly, is that the threshold you would work with, or how do you see that?
I was going to say, I feel more secure having somebody like assuming that the exchange is covering the withdrawal fee, which some do with batching and which is nice. If they're covering the withdrawal fee and they're doing on chain, or even if they're offering lightning or liquid withdrawals, still I feel like somebody's better off, in self custody, even sitting in liquid with a federation versus a single point of failure as the exchange. So right. if I think that they're capable of, that process of, hey, hit receive, and then based on their exchange, if it's on chain, they have a direct pig-in option there. Just hit this button and send here. I feel like that's a better way where you can build it to 1 million sats within that environment with your DCA.
Right. So coming back to that staging area concept, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think, again, there's a spectrum here, but like single point of failure versus like 11 of 15, I'll go with the 11 of 15 as I build some savings and then go to on-chain. That's how I would approach it.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, historically, I've been, just saying, hey, look, once you get to a certain balance that you're uncomfortable with on an exchange, it's time to start withdrawing. And usually it ends up being $1,000 just as a make it worthwhile. But also you don't want too small UTXOs in your wallet right. as well. And so, yeah, it just kind of gets... Yeah,
there's a balance.
I just say, I think there's a balance there. And I just say, hey, look, 1 million sats, probably the best, the mark there.
Yeah,
fair enough. Okay, so look, let's get into the hardware wallets or hardware signers discussion. So again, same question. What would you recommend for a noob, and what do you personally like using?
So I'm a big fan of CoinKite. I love all their stuff. Usually when I'm leaning that direction for kind of somebody just getting started that maybe doesn't want to blow a lot on a hardware device, I'll just say, hey, try out a tap signer. Like the ease of spending, like type in a pin.
And those are like $40, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like $40. And so, it's mobile friendly. A lot of people may not be using a laptop or something like that. I'll say like, this is, it gives you an additional layer of security if you're just kind of learning about, how does hardware function? How is this different from a hot wallet? I think that's a good entry point. I do try to level people up to a cold card, namely the queue over time. I think that's kind of the way to go. I'm not beyond I'm not beyond allowing people to take steps to use it in the most secure way though. So like if somebody is super timid, then sometimes I have to recognize like, what, for this person in particular, they may just be plugging that thing in. And that's okay, in my opinion. And then I can leave the breadcrumbs of, hey, like once you're comfortable with that, Sparrow, let's let's look at air gapping and using the QR codes or whatever. I think there's a pathway there. But again, I love the tap signer. I love the cold card queue. I did just try out the BitKey the other day. I can see who their target market is. It's not the hardened Bitcoiner or somebody that's maybe on the pathway to being a hardened Bitcoiner, but it was very, very easy, I'll say. There's a lot of nuance there, but my hope is that the ease of use that they have with that product is seen by vendors and is begun to be emulated, perhaps without certain trade-offs that they have. Yeah, my default right now is kind of tap sign or cold card queue.
Yeah. K3tan?
Yeah, for me, it'd be cold card queue as well. And one of the, I guess, the reasons for that is the full keyboard. I like the full keyboard.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that helps with passphrase management a lot better than clicking down into a menu and tapping 1,000 times. And so, yeah, look, the cold card queue was probably my pick there for a hardware wallet. Yeah, that's kind of what I use, and I think noobs can use it as well. But yeah, you have to, there is a learning curve there, and I think the Sparrow Wallet documentation does a good job of, you know,
walking
how to
you
import,
through that.
yeah, walking you through that. So I send people there as well. But yeah, yeah, the instructions are thin on the actual cold card queue, but the Sparrow Wallet will just, you know, solidify that for you. So I like it.
Yeah. And obviously, I'll point out, obviously, I'm sponsored by CoinKite. I think, Ben, I believe you are sponsored by CoinKite also. But I will say, honestly, I was recommending Cold Card even before they sponsored me, and I think it's a really great product. One point I will make here as well is that you can do a really easy, like, let's say you get them to get a Cold Card queue, get 3 AAA batteries, and then they can just use Nunchuck on the phone.
Yes.
No other cables required. Like, you can just do QR codes or NFC if you wish. And that is worlds ahead of where we used to be years ago, right? Because years ago, I would be telling them, oh, okay, get the cold card. You got to get the charge
SD
cable for
card.
this. You got to get the SD card. And then your laptop might not have an SD card reader, so you need this other bit. And like, when you start, you know, like, and of course, you can still do that. And I still do. But having QR code and just batteries means you can tell somebody, hey, just buy 3 AAA batteries and use Nunchuck on the phone. Boom. That's like, there's a certain simplicity to that is easier for setup, right? And so that's something. But let's talk a little bit about also the price points as well. So do you guys have any comments on the price points and what thresholds, coming back to, again, thresholds, how much Bitcoin should that person have? Let's say you've put them onto a phone wallet to start with. What is the threshold above which you would say, okay, it's time to get a hardware device?
That's a tough one. That's going to be very personal for each person. You know, it pertains very much to the same on-chain discussion that we're having before. Like 1,000,000 sats is like where you're sitting on-chain. You know, that currently is like $1,000. I think that you should treat your Bitcoin as if it's worth 10 times what it is right now. And so when you're looking at $1,000, that's going to be 10. Is it worth dropping $200 on a device that will secure $10,000 value? I think yes. And so what you're really doing is you're trying to get somebody to future proof so that when it suddenly is 10 grand instead of 1, they're not scrambling to learn self-custody and cold storage. They already mastered it when they had 1/10 the value. That's my take.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. For me, $200 to $300 would be my price point for a hardware wallet. That would kind of be where I'd be looking at. And if for 1,000,000 sats is where I'd probably be starting that. And then if you've got 5 grand, then it's time to move on to a hardware wallet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if you think percentage wise, I mean, for me,
exactly.
It depends how much that person is comfortable holding on a phone wallet, right? If they're comfortable just walking around with, $5,000 on their phone, I mean, maybe some people that are, and depends where you live, right? If you're in a kind of a safer area, maybe that's okay. And maybe other parts of the world, you're not comfortable with that. And so, but even as you said, the percentage, let's say 200 so as I check CoinKite, it's $240, but you can get a discount code, code Livera. I'm sure BTC Sessions is also a code. So there's codes out there. You can get a bit of a discount on it. And then it's like $220 or something like that. If you've got $5,000 or $10,000, i.e. 0.05 BTC or 0.1 BTC, it's a no-brainer, right? Like we're talking maybe 2% or 1% kind of level, or 2%, maybe 4% of your stack to secure it more safely. So I think that's an interesting point that I think people easily forget, right? That this is a small percentage, once it becomes that size, it's a very small percentage of your stack that, the amount is almost trivial compared to, how much you're securing.
Well, you're giving up a percentage or two in exchange for giving up 100% when you screw up and lose your coins.
Well, that's right. Like if you're, say, for example, you are traveling and you've got it on your mobile phone and the TSA agent decides, hey, I want to scan your phone. Or something happens, while you're crossing borders or something like that. Then yeah, like why risk that when you can just, have it on a hardware wallet and leave that at home, and then roam around with $200-$300 on your phone, instead of 5 or 10.
I'll say you also just made a good case for the tap signer for traveling because
it just fits in your wallet, right?
Yeah, it's not often that the TSA asks you to dump out your credit card on a
Yeah,
table,
that's true.
So.
That's true.
The lead sponsor of this show is Bold, the best place to buy, sell, and save Bitcoin. For listeners in the US, Bold lets you secure your financial future with complete peace of mind by integrating a low-fee, Bitcoin-only brokerage with next-gen multi-sig vaults. With Bold, you can smash buy Bitcoin or set a DCA plan for only 0.99% fees and seamlessly deposit the Bitcoin direct to your Bold vault. The Bold Vault is a 2 or 3 collaborative multi-sig where you hold 2 keys and Bold holds 1 as a redundant backup, protecting against loss or theft. You can use Trezor, Ledger, or Cold Card hardware wallets to spin up a Bold Vault in just a few minutes, and the Bold Vault is the only collaborative custody vault available with 0 monthly fees. They're also offering 0 fees on your first $10,000 of Bitcoin buys and $25 of free Bitcoin when you buy $100 of Bitcoin or more. Try Bold today and upgrade your stacking experience over at getbold.io. This show also brought to you by Nomad Capitalist. Nomad Capitalist is a leading provider in terms of offshore tax and lifestyle strategy planning and implementation. They can help you go overseas and legally lower your taxes. As many of you know, I grew up in Australia, but I left. I was sick of it in terms of the taxes and the COVID tyranny and all these other things. And so that's why I left, and now I live in Dubai. But that's not necessarily the place for you. You have to think exactly what works for you, for your family, for your business. And Nomad Capitalists have worked across dozens of different countries. They've helped people get passports, residences, bank accounts, and all kinds of other things. And importantly, it's not just about choosing one place. It may be multiple places. And it may be also about making the pieces fit together in terms of how your business fits with your family and you as an individual. Nomad Capitalists have helped many, many people in terms of going overseas. And if you're interested, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply. This is applicable for people with a net worth above $1 million US. That's nomadcapitalist.com/apply. And now back to the show. Right, yeah. I mean, everything is trade-offs, right? And the tap signer doesn't have a screen, so there's certain trade-offs to that. Or even the BitKey, exactly. Right? That was probably one of my criticisms of the BitKey. But I want to be fair to them also. They are also helping noobs get off the exchange, right? And generally speaking, I'm happy for people to get off the exchange or custodians. So that's a good thing. But it's sort of, yeah, not having a screen makes it hard to actually verify where are you sending those coins to, right? So then you're just kind of trusting when you do the, and I have had a test unit. I got sent a unit as well with this BitKey, and it has like a little, fingerprint reader thing. So it kind of goes green once you authenticate like that. But it does have some interesting recovery features. And I think those are worth talking about also, right? Because it's one thing for us to tell people, hey, try out these hardware wallets, but it's also, what's it going to be like in 4 or 5 years' time? Let's say number has gone up, like as you said, who knows if the price has gone up X or whatever in that time, and it's now worth a lot more money. And if that person, now has to think about recovery and inheritance and some of these other conversations that come, later on. It's not just about setting up the wallet, it's about sustaining that. Do you have any tips, any thoughts you want to share there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing with whatever hardware somebody is going with is that they actually go through the recovery process with a small amount on it during the initial setup process. Yeah. First of all, you make sure that your backup is actually right.
Working. Yeah.
And working. And secondly, like the amount of stress if something happens to your device and you've not tried the backup, like that's worth it alone. to have gone through it entirely beforehand. And I mean, I've heard horror stories of people going, my device crapped out. I went to recover and my seed phrase is invalid. And I don't know what I did, or if I rearranged some words, or if I wrote something wrong. And so then it becomes like testing stuff out, and then maybe you might be forced to go to, somebody that's going to try and brute force it for you, and then it's like your fate is in their hands. Like they could say it didn't work or whatever. So yeah, test your backups as you're setting up the device, and load it with a small amount, and then if that works, then you're good, you're safe, you can continue, and you have the confidence of, I recovered once, I'll be able to do it again.
Yeah,
and also test all of those functionalities. So receive, send. A lot of people forget to just send, and then back up and restore. Obviously, those 4 functions are absolutely critical for whatever option that you're using.
Yeah. Okay. Now, while we're on the conversation of hardware wallets, hardware signers, now a typical way people start is just basic single signature, no passphrase, no multi-sig, etc. Do you guys have any tips for people who are thinking about when they should upgrade? Like, what is the right time for a hodler to think about, okay, now it's getting to a larger amount, it's time to think about doing passphrase or doing multi-sig? How do you broach that, or how do you explain that for people?
So I think what Ben said earlier, this is like the bull market is probably not the best time to be looking at what's going on and trying to overhaul your setup. I think emotions fly a lot when prices are going up, and you get scared, and you may do something without all things considered properly. So you should be doing it, in my opinion, in the bear market, when no one gives a shit about your Bitcoin or Bitcoin in general. So I think that's probably the best time to be like, okay, well, if this was to 10x, this is what this is where I want to be. And if that's the case, then you might want to add in a passphrase, or you may wish to upgrade it to multi-sig. But I don't know if you should be doing that during the bull run. That's when you're going to, you may shoot yourself in the foot. For testing, that's fine for small amounts, but your entire stack, that's, I would probably hold off on that idea and just sort of think through very, very carefully before you start to, fiddle with things, because you could lose things. You could shoot yourself in the foot. Things go wrong. But generally speaking, like, just as a general rule, 12 words is enough. Okay, it is still, it's not broken, right? 12 words is still enough. 24 words is even better. But if you want to move to a passphrase, and if you want to move to multi-sig, then yes, take some time, test first, and then move to it. I think that's probably the best way of going about it. Not during a bull run when your emotions are flying way too high. Yeah.
I mean, I'd just quickly add, as a general rule, don't be too quick to kind of move your full cold stack to some new thing. Like whether it's new software or new hardware, just kind of maybe play around with small amounts, but don't kind of move your big hodl cold stack to anything new and unbattle tested. It needs to be battle tested and out there for years before you even think about putting a serious amount of coin on there. And what you could do, as an example, during a bull run, you might think, look, the number has gone up 5x, 10x, whatever. Who knows? And now it's time to actually just buy some different devices and test. Have some test setups and kind of have that ready as your test setup. And you're comfortable with recovering. You're comfortable with like, let's say I've set up a 3 or 5 and I know this device is gone. I know how to recover that device. I know how to still spend using my multi-sig, things like this. That's kind of how I would view it. So don't just kind of think, new hardware wallet came out, I'm going to put my whole stack on there straight away. No, it's kind of be wary and be sort of methodical about it is how I would approach it. Ben, anything to add there?
Yeah, so I agree with the general sentiment of the last time you want to be making quick decisions is when you're emotional because the price is going wild. I think the way that I tend to think of it is if you're on an exchange during a bull run, then yes, you should be actively learning self-custody right now, even though it's a bull run. Like that's priority, because we all saw what happened last bull run. Inevitably, there's blow ups. So I think that's one of the exceptions where it's like, okay, you're going to start learning, but you're going to be slow and methodical. You're not just suddenly moving vast amounts of money around. You're slow and intentional with what you're doing. And you're going to a pretty battle-hardened basic setup to start. What I will say in and around upgrading from, say, single sig to adding a passphrase, or single sig to multi-sig, or whatever it may be, I think given like the length of cycles, I think it's okay to be learning and perhaps migrating during a bull run, but again, not the knee-jerk, it just went up a whole bunch, I got to move everything fast. No, it's again slow and methodical. Learn, take 5%, something like that, move it over, get used to that. As you get more comfortable, take chunks and start migrating. But you can't be, you're more likely going to shoot yourself in the foot than somebody's going to kick in your door and ask for your seed phrase. So just be cognizant of that. You can also, without even having to do like try something new and put in a passphrase with the queue, they have trick pins. So you can have a pin on your device, and when you type it in, the cold card looks like it hasn't been initialized yet. So like there's ways around that where at least you can have some plausible deniability, or it leads to a decoy wallet and you put $1,000 in there. So there's things that you can do in the interim that aren't going to risk the existing stack, but are also going to give you if somebody is actually threatening you in person, you can say like, my main stack, or like whether you even say something like that is somewhere else, but this is what I have here. This is why I have this device. It's protecting like $1,000. Here's the pin. Check it out yourself. That's a viable path.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so look, we got to get on. Let's move on to the nodes conversation. Got to leave some time for that. So, just, I guess, intro, just for people who are new, I guess, if you're new, you might have heard about running a Bitcoin node. The point of this is not necessarily to sort of save the network or whatever. It's a selfish act, right? You're doing this because you want to verify your own Bitcoin transactions, your own history, and maybe you want to be able to protect your ability to transact even if somebody else is blocking you from transacting. That's kind of what you're doing. And so there are various ways to operate your own Bitcoin node, right? There are these node in a box, packages. Some of them are software packages you can download. Some of them are actual hardware, things that you can buy and plug in and operate. And of course, you can run it on your own laptop if you are, so inclined. So with that kind of intro out of the way, what are your thoughts, guys? What are your kind of favorite node in a box or stack that you like to use?
Okay, so for me, I run the Ministry of Nodes Bitcoin node box, obviously, but I do like, what Start9 are doing. There's plenty of options, and I'm grateful for all of them. I like, there's the Umbrals of the world. There's, Ronin Dojo. There's MyNode. There's, plenty of Raspberry Blitz. There's a whole bunch of options for Bitcoiners to run their own Bitcoin node based on whatever hardware that they like. But for me, I like the Ministry of Nodes Bitcoin node box. It's strong, it's stable, it's reliable, and I've built it myself, which is a trade-off in itself, right? And so that's kind of like the DIY approach. You're not really using a trusted third party to sort of install and keep it updated and all that sort of stuff. You're doing it yourself. What I use, but I know that that's probably not viable for everyone, especially if you're brand new and you're just like, what is Linux? So yeah, like I think that a Start9 would be something that, people can purchase right out of the gate and hopefully have something running. But Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I love that the DIY stuff is possible, and like for the technically inclined or somebody who wants a weekend project, I think that's fantastic. Out of the kind of pre-constructed like node in a box, and I guess, I should say as well, for people that are just looking for the idea of, I just want to run a copy of the Bitcoin blockchain and reference that one for my on-chain transactions, you can just download Bitcoin Core on your computer and link Sparrow to it. And then like all your transactions, you're viewing your copy of the blockchain. So that's possible, and that's free. So that's some people should be aware of that. But I also like, I'm playing around with Lightning. I like running my own instance of mempool.space to look at transaction information and other things. And so, K3tan, on the same lines as you. I think that Start9 for me, it strikes the sweet spot of a few things. Number one, plug and play. You just get the thing, you plug it into the wall and plug it into your router, and then you just go to any computer or device on your network and type in the IP address, and it just shows up in your browser. And then you have like an app store where you can download things and go from there. That's perfect. Now, I know that Umbrel has made some trade-offs to make theirs much more user-friendly and beautiful to look at and all that. And I appreciate that. Like they kind of set the bar for like user experience, I think. But what I like about Start9 is the approach where, especially with the Pure, they've tried to go as open source as they possibly can with both the software and the hardware. I also really, really like the approach that they're taking with the marketplace or the app store. In that, yes, they have the Start9 marketplace where you download apps, but you can also manually plug in anyone's self-hosted app store. And so the end vision of that is if Start9 had their doors kicked in and they shut down their servers, anybody could spin up their own app store and it could become known amongst the community, and people can just plug that in. And your Start9 still functions and you're still able to download apps, get updates, all of that. It still lives on. And so that resilience is really attractive to me, paired with the ease of use. It's a little bit more technical than Umbrel, but I think it strikes a good balance.
Yeah. Okay, and then what are you guys finding in terms of performance and cost effectiveness? There's different types of devices that you can use. So any comments there?
Yeah, so obviously Ben alluded to the freest one, which is your laptop. If it's got, 2 terabytes on it already, then happy days. Then you can just download the whole, chain and off you go. And I think, but if you want a dedicated device that's always online, then I like the Office PCs, those refurbished Office PCs like a Dell Optiplex. That's my favorite. They're just workhorses. The boomers built them and they still just keep running like, and they just keep running well. And so that's why I kind of just, I want something that's always online. I'm not meddling with it. I'm not fiddling with it. It's always there, and they're relatively cheap, right? I think so. Australian, $150 would get me one of those paired with a 2 terabyte SSD, another $150. Say you're looking at a cheap Bitcoin node out of like ready for hardware at 300 Australian, which I don't know what that amounts to, probably about, $5 US, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Canadian dollars is about the same place as you. So we're talking nickels here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's relatively cheap to get those. Raspberry Pis, I'm still not convinced. So they just came out with a Raspberry Pi 5 with 16 gigs of RAM. They just announced that for $120 US. I think the CPU is the bottleneck there rather than the RAM when you're doing an initial blockchain download. So I think that's probably it's just out of reach. I think back in the day, maybe yes, it was okay, but now I think you need something a little bit more rock solid. An Intel processor would be, where you need to be. So a NUC, a laptop, an Office refurbished PC. That's where you need to be in terms of hardware, or whatever. Like for example, if Start9 ships you something, obviously the hardware is going to be compatible. So that's the option there as well.
Yeah. Ben, any thoughts on hardware?
Yeah, I'd pretty much just echo that. Like if you're doing DIY, you probably don't want to go with a Raspberry Pi. And part of it, one of the issues is when you're plugging in an external SSD, like the power draw on it, like those things weren't necessarily designed to have like a something like that drawing power constantly. So those are some of the issues that you might run into. Whereas if you get like an Intel NUC, like an old one, it's going to run just fine and have no issues. And it can just always be on, and you don't really have to worry. So I've got a Start9 behind me, but I've also, for the Ashigaru wallet, I did set up a dojo on an old Intel NUC. And this thing, I don't know how many years old it is, but it's on right now. Since I made it, it's running fine. So yeah, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah. And I think I would add just here that it's important to, again, understand you're either paying with your money or paying with your time. Because sometimes when we have these conversations, you'll kind of hear someone saying, "Oh, but you shouldn't pay for this. You should just DIY, do it yourself, or whatever." But it's sort of like they're not thinking about, okay, what about the kind of configuration time? What about the kind of time you kind of hitting your head into the wall to try to configure your Electrum server or this other thing? Whereas if you just bought the product, right? Like as an example, the Ministry of Nodes node box, which I use as well, I think it's $350 USD plus shipping. And that's probably on the cheaper side. There are devices ranging up to maybe 600, 700, something like that. But for some people, it's actually worth your while, right? Like if you're storing, serious amount of coin, right? Like $100,000 plus or 1 BTC plus, it's kind of like, yeah, would you pay, 0.35% of your stack to make sure you're verifying it correctly instead of just trusting somebody else's node? Yeah, when you put it in those terms, it is kind of worth your while.
Well, I think the general lesson is, if my kid shoves a toy down the toilet, I could learn how to become a plumber, or I could pay somebody to come over and fix the problem that's been doing it for their whole lives and save myself, 20 hours of figuring out how to unclog a toilet or open up my drains and figure that out. I'd prefer to spend my time providing value to others in a way that will make me enough money to pay for the plumber.
Yep, great way to think about it.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, we're talking a bit about that, like nodes that are running a lot of software and a lot of apps versus the more minimal. What do you guys think there?
I appreciate both. So I appreciate having a node that has all of the things, just so that I can test them out, see what's going on, what's good. Otherwise, how do I know what's good, right? If I'm not given those options, how do I know, is this worthwhile? Is this a great bit? Bitcoiners are building out so much software these days, and we need to see, okay, look, what's good? What's what can be improved upon? You can give your feedback to the developers of that, but it all starts with just actually using it. So the kitchen sink approach is fantastic, but I also value having another node that just sits there like a workhorse and is always up, is always reliable, is always going to be there when I need to transact, whether it's 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever I need it to do. I value that as well. So I think that that's probably where I stand. Have to. Maybe that might be an option so that you can...
But to be fair, part of it is like, guys like us, we are kind of more professionally, for somebody who maybe they just want to hodl, maybe it's a different conversation for them. Maybe they would just have one.
Exactly. And that for them, that would be the reliable approach, the cheap, the strong horse, the thing that goes. Right. But if you like to tinker, and if you like lightning, and if you like this and you like that, and you want to experience more, then maybe the kitchen sink node is for you as well.
Yeah. I usually frame it with the question, how crazy are you? Like, how do you want to think of this? Like,
you like to click lots of buttons and try lots of things, or do you just want like solid, reliable?
Yeah, and are you one of those people that is going to be like, I want my full online life to actually be fully self-sovereign. Like I'm running everything in my home. Any like smart devices are linked through my thing. Like all my stuff is hosted. If that's you, then I would say what K3tan said, where maybe it's time to look at two. You've got your Bitcoin workhorse, and then you've got your digital life device that's like your server for that purpose. That's maybe the pathway. But if you're just tinkering, if you got mostly your Bitcoin stuff that you're doing, and then you want to play around and test some other things, that's totally cool.
Yeah. All right. So I guess I'll just quickly summarize that for listeners who are just thinking, look, I don't really care about all this other stuff. I just want something to do my Bitcoin stuff. Then something that runs Bitcoin Core or a Bitcoin implementation and an Electrum server that you can point your Sparrow Wallet to understand, like your Sparrow Wallet is then going to read, let's say, the transactions and everything from that Electrum server that you run. That's where you might want just the more minimal approach versus the running lots of apps, where if you want those extra features, that's a different product and different services there. So let's finish up. That's the nodes aspect of it. Let's get now to the merchants conversation. So in this, let's say, topic or theme, we're talking about how do you best enable, the individual, the sovereign businessman to be a merchant and actually take payment in Bitcoin. So like we were saying before, what would you recommend for a noob versus what do you like to use personally? Now, there's a bunch of different approaches, so let's hear it from you guys.
Okay, so for me, my personal use, I love BTC Pay Server. It's free and open source software. It is fantastic. It's just stuck with me and I've used it for years. And because it was so good, I probably haven't explored any other of the options. So for me, it's like, okay, I've got this thing. It works. It works 100% of the time. It's always up, and I get paid, and and it's great. And so that's really what I like about BTC Pay Server. And yeah, for noobs though, I'm not quite sure what to recommend. Maybe Ben can sort of go from there. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, BTC Pay is like the shining beacon of what everybody would like to attain in terms of self-sovereignty. Obviously, the things that are going to come up in that realm are like self-hosting. Like, are you running this on your own device? If so, you're going to need some networking knowledge to make it accessible on public internet, because it's all like Start9 is Tor by default. So like that's a thing you got to deal with, or you're hosting it on like Luna Node or Voltage or whatever. So there's, if you're hosting, then there's costs associated with that too. So lots to navigate with BTC Pay, but what they've done there is nothing short of a miracle. It's beautiful software. I'm so happy with everything that they've done. If we step back to like somebody brand new, they're like, I'm in person, I want to accept Bitcoin, or just on a very simplistic, I'm in front of a person and I need a keypad and I need to receive Bitcoin. And then it's something where they'll be able to have like full self-custody at some point down the line. Honestly, I think Coinos is doing a good job in that respect. In regards to, there's a caveat where it is custodial. You're able to do Lightning, Liquid, and on-chain all as a single unified balance. And there's a setting where you can trigger a withdraw at certain thresholds to your own self-custody. So at least the person can say like, all right, I hit 1 million sats, it auto withdraws to my hardware. So there's that path to self-sovereignty with the ease of use on the front end. Now, if you're getting a little bit more granular than that and you want to start, you're doing like invoicing, you need point of sale, you need like payment links and stuff like that. Zapright is, for me, hands down the winner there. They're like, what Parker and team have done is astounding. John at Zapright, he's a magician. It's basically you can plug in whatever you need. Zapright never takes any custody. It's just they're a portal for you to be able to use. So you can do invoicing. You can have a point of sale on your phone. You can have payment links where people have set amounts that they pay you, tip pages, all that. And they have plugins for whatever you're using. So you've got an on-chain wallet, grab your XPub, plunk it in. It will generate a new address every single time. You have, if you're running your own Lightning node, you can link that through to Zapright. But if you're not running your own Lightning node, you can, if you have Strike where you are, you can just link that in. If you have like Albi, so the way I've done it, I've actually got Albi Hub on my Start9, which is my own LND node. But I just plunk in my Lightning address, and it will auto like generate the invoices for me. So when I get paid through Zapright, when I'm invoicing, when I'm doing tips, whatever, it all goes directly to my Start9 Lightning node, or it goes directly to my cold card. And so like, it's seamless. And the best part about it is if you do get people that pay you in fiat as well, you also have plugins for like Stripe and PayPal and like the fiat ones, but you can charge a premium for fiat if you want to discourage it. So like, again, I can't say enough good things about Zapright. It's like right in that sweet spot where if you need more control, but you want self-sovereignty and you want self-custody, then it's right there.
Fascinating. Yeah. And I think we're going to see lots of approaches, and it's kind of, there's so many out there, right? Like we said, BTC Pay, Zapright. I think Blink might even have some merchant feature as well. Yes. Coinos, as you said, and some of the well-known ones like OpenNode and Ebex Pay. I think Coin Corner have a merchant thing. Bitfinex, I think they also have like Bitfinex Pay, something like that. Also, there's that new one Tancred is doing. It's more like for freelancers, where it's kind of like using Breeze SDK. And so it's like using that node listing. So I think the idea is the end user can pay Lightning, let's say if you're a freelancer, you're a digital nomad or whatever, it can kind of take it into liquid Bitcoin, and then you can swap it out
Right.
as you need, right? So on the front end, it can show a Lightning invoice, but you can kind of take it in liquid without having to deal with channels and that kind of aspect of it. So there's kind of all these different options, all with different costs and fees as well. So, and then I guess for some certain users, depending on who you're talking to, they may still need fiat. Right now, of course, we all wish we could live fully on Bitcoin, but today we still have to interact with the fiat system to either pay our rent and our bills and our whatever. So what are some approaches that you find practical there for, let's say you're talking to somebody who's like, I want to take payment in Bitcoin, but I still need some fiat because I've got bills to pay. What's your recommendation there, right? Do they go to the KYC exchange? Do they use stable sats? Do they get stable coins? Do they sell it peer-to-peer? What do you normally recommend?
Well, I mean, if somebody's just starting to accept Bitcoin, first off, you're not going to get 100% of your payments in Bitcoin. You're going to get, you'll be lucky to get Bitcoin payments unless you're very, very vocal about it to the Bitcoin community. If you are vocal about it, you'll get some Bitcoin payments, which is great. And you're likely already, hopefully, spending less than you earn and able to save a little bit. So the Bitcoin payments that come in, you can just save.
Right. You just hodl those and spend out of your fiat income. Yeah.
But that said, I'm at a point where 95% of my income is Bitcoin. And so I've got to use different mechanisms to be able to like make ends meet and make sure that I'm able to survive. So, I mean, I'm in Canada, so there's actually two different services in Canada where you can just pay your bills in Bitcoin. There's Bitcoin Well and there's Bull Bitcoin, and they both offer bill payment services. They say, what bill do you want to pay? How much? And then here's a QR code, send your Bitcoin, and then they take care of the rest. So that simplifies a lot of things. Gift cards for day-to-day stuff, for gas cards, for groceries, things like that. You can use things like Bitrefill, coin cards, Bitcoin Company. All those, you can just, send a lightning payment and get a scannable barcode that you just scan at the grocery store. And then the last piece of it for me has been building out a local community. So in Calgary, we have the SAP market now. It's been running for about a year. We do it a couple times a year. But the important part is that we've all made connections with each other and it's not just like apparel. It's not like just buying Bitcoin shirts or something like that. It's like day-to-day needs. So I know farmers where I can go get eggs and beef and chicken and all of that. I have tradesmen, like we were talking about plumbers earlier. My kid does shove stuff down the toilet, and I pay in Bitcoin for the Bitcoin plumber to come to my house and fix it. He's been here 3 times already. But like I can get my daily needs met. My barber is accepting Bitcoin. Like we've got it nailed down, and I think that's the most resilient approach. Is if you can begin to build a community locally, that can't be shut down. They can't tell you who to be friends with. And if somebody happens to bring over 24 eggs, and I happen to generously send him some sats completely unrelated to the eggs, then, who's to say that I'm not allowed to do that?
Yeah, no, look, I think those are fantastic options. With Ministry of Nodes, I use the gift card stuff as well. So like if I need to buy SSDs, Bitrefill to get an Amazon gift voucher, bang, I'm straight in. But again, yes, I will have a fiat income. So some people do decide to pay instead of using Bitcoin and taking the discount. Some still pay via PayPal or whatever fiat mechanism. And so I'll take that and I'll use that first before going into the Bitcoin stack. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that. And if I needed to sell, then yeah, it'd be through, just buying a gift card or that's really
those are the main ways you would go about it. Okay, fair enough. So we've spoken a bit about a bunch of things: wallets, nodes, merchants, a lot of things. I guess one other question that did come to my mind is, it seems kind of funny that Bitcoin price has run up so much recently, and yet the fees are actually relatively low, right? As I look right now, you can get into the next block for 7 sats per VByte, and in fiat terms, that's about 93 US cents to get into the next block. And people getting into blocks even cheaper than that. Is it odd to you that fees are this low while Bitcoin is up above 90,000?
For me, no. I've seen more patterns with this. Like around Christmas, New Year's, the network is generally pretty low in terms of usage. And so maybe that could be a function of this. And the other time is July 4th weekend. It's dead again. And so I've picked up on this. I've picked up on these things where it's like, hey, the Americans aren't home, basically. And so you'll see that in the network. And so, yes, so at this time, I'm probably, okay, fine, yeah. But it also could also mean that people are being onboarded onto ETFs or onto MSTR, and they're doing the bidding for us, and or maybe people are just leaving it on exchange, like massive amounts are being left on exchange, and so we're not seeing that hit on chain yet. And so when people learn, hopefully, then they'll come back to this podcast, the start of it, the hardware wallet section and the keys section, and they'll go through that whole process. So I think it is a cyclical style, but does it surprise me that 1 sat per byte is clearing? No, because I've picked that from a while ago.
Great.
Yeah.
Ben?
Yeah, I think it's indicative of a few things. And I want to kind of toss back to the environment, let's say at the peak of the 2017 run. We had basically no infrastructure in place to help with fee spikes and lots of usage. And so back then, it was we didn't have SegWit, so it was all legacy addresses, or we did, but it wasn't
very few were using
really
it. Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah.
All of the wallets had horrible fee estimation. You couldn't like bump fees or anything like that. It was just like whatever you sent.
And no Lightning.
Yeah. Lightning was but a twinkle in some developers' eyes. And on top of that, all of the exchanges were horribly inefficient with their on-chain. Like nobody was batching. Every withdrawal was an individual transaction, which sounds like insanity. And so I remember paying $150 for a transaction fee in December of 2017. And that's with the price at 20K. And so now,
but that would be on the extreme end, to be fair. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It was extreme, but like it was partly because my wallet was so ill-equipped to deal with fees. Like I didn't have even a choice of fees. I couldn't even set the fee. It defaulted to the most efficient next block fee. So that's kind of the environment we were in. Flash forward to today. One, exchanges are cognizant and batching and doing all that kind of stuff. Two, K3tan's right. Like it can, and Stefan, you're right. It can indicate the type of people that are buying at the current time. There's a ton of people that are buying and going in through ETFs or MicroStrategy or leaving stuff on exchanges, especially that last one. We need to teach more people how to self-custody and encourage it. But three, when people do withdraw and use it and have it in mobile wallets and they're transacting, more people doing that stuff are using Lightning wallets for day-to-day Bitcoin transactions. So you've got kind of this trifecta of things that have limited on-chain. Plus, it's just quiet around this time, as K3tan said, too. And I think the most bullish thing is that nobody gives a shit about ordinals right now. So that's great.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, well, yeah, we've covered a lot of stuff, but yeah, we've spoken about wallets, we've spoken about nodes, we've spoken about merchants. Hopefully, people have gotten some ideas on how to go about things. Of course, things are going to evolve, right? Even in 6 months from now or 1 year from now, this will be out of date, so maybe we'll have to do another one then. But thank you guys for joining me and sharing your expertise. Just before we let you go, lastly, where can people find you, your websites?
Yep, so you can find me at ministryofnodes.com. And if you'd like to purchase a Bitcoin node, it's
.au, right?
No, the .au, it goes to .au automatically. So ministryofnodes.com will forward over to ministryofnodes.com.au. And you can also purchase at shop.ministryofnodes.com as well. And if you want to find me on Twitter, Ministry of Nodes, as well as _K3tan.
Great. And Ben?
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, you can find my tutorial content on YouTube. Just search BTC Sessions. I'm on Twitter and Nostr. It should be pretty easy to find me there. And then you can also find me through my company, Bitcoin Mentor. So bitcoinmentor.io. And that's kind of all like one-on-one helping people through their self-sovereignty and then their Bitcoin stack.
Fantastic. Well, thanks guys for joining me.
Thanks, Scott.